to be like part of the gospel.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
Sunday or whatever day.
Okay, so across the tidal pool, you can observe what was known in the year 2013 as the Jefferson Memorial. Similar to the Lincoln Memorial, it contains a larger-than-life statue to a man who lived hundreds of years in the past by the name Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson antecedes even Abraham Lincoln. In fact, Jefferson was George Washington's contemporary. Thomas Jefferson was one of the architects of the new central government that I referred to back at the canal. It was him who represented the factions of southern states who demanded the capital to be moved from New York City to the south, which is why D.C. was built on this spot. Jefferson, by the year 2013, was probably best known as the author of a famous document written in 1776 called the Declaration of Independence. This document was central to how Americans viewed themselves and to their collective delusion that any coercive government could be good or should be considered legitimate. I'd like to quickly point to a few basic logical inconsistencies in the document for which Jefferson was so idolized, and then talk a little bit about his life. The Declaration of Independence was a document drafted by Jefferson upon request by a new organization calling itself the Continental Congress. In this document, he elaborated his theory of government. I'd like to quote from that declaration. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creators with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Now, a statement of such audacious falsehood is rarely to be found in history. Who could possibly agree that it is a self-evident truth that men are created equal? If anything is self-evident, it is that men are not equal. What is self-evident, to me at least, is that each individual human is unique, and that any artificial attempt to treat all people the same, or force anyone to treat all people the same, denying their obvious differences, is foolish at best and dangerous at worst. This concept of equality among men was a barbaric illusion, one impossible to realize, and one that would serve as justification for the most unbelievable acts of brutality for centuries after the Declaration was written. Nor is it in any way self-evident that a creator gave us our rights. There may be such a creator, none of us know, but it is certainly not self-evident that one exists. If anything seems self-evident to me, it is that Jefferson did not subject his ideas to critical, rational examination. Let me continue with this passage. Jefferson writes that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, Jefferson was considered a learned man, but such an inaccurate view of the origins of government should not be forgiven. Government was always created through conquest. In fact, there is no evidence in history of a government instituted voluntarily by all those that it would have claimed to rule. It is true that there have been cases where the existing rulers of a region decide to come together, such as would happen within a few years in the United States, but the vast majority of people have never, even by the year 2013, voluntarily chosen to submit themselves to a coercive government. Even the body that Jefferson represented when he wrote the Declaration, the Continental Congress, consisted of largely self-selected wealthy elites who controlled their own state governments and ruled over their people by force of arms. So Jefferson suffered a fatal misunderstanding of the original provenance of all government, which is not in fact consent, but instead conquest and coercion. Even in 2013, nearly 250 years later, the Americans had still not realized how far Jefferson had erred in the premise of this, his most famous composition. And unfortunately for them, they had largely internalized his flawed theories. These ideas would prevent them viewing government for what it really is, institutionalized predation. Jefferson might have served humanity better had he been more critical of his own individual behavior and less interested in expounding his fanciful ideas of good government. A famous passage he wrote in a letter is engraved upon his head on the statue you see across the water. The passage reads, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." If there is such a God, Jefferson's words must have made him laugh at the heights of his hypocrisy expressed by this sentiment. For it is a fact that Jefferson himself held hundreds of human minds in bondage and subjected them to a tyranny far, far greater than any tyranny to which Great Britain had subjected his countrymen. His slaves were forced to work his fields and earn his money, which afforded him the lifestyle of a country gentleman, a life full of philosophic sophistry and grandiose delusions of government. Like Washington's canal, Jefferson's musings on philosophy, if expressed in modern times, would be ignored or serve as a source of derision. But just like Washington's canal, these bad ideas, when combined with a coercive state, would plague the ancient Americans for generations. So with that, we will, I guess, skip the Pentagon, but head back to Chris's place. Why skip the Pentagon? Well, we don't have enough time. It's almost